Hey everybody, I'm Eboni K. Williams along with Eric Bolling and Kat Timpf, and we are the Fox News Specialists. President Trump escalating his battle with ousted FBI Director James Comey and critics. The president tweeting that tapes may exist from his private conversations with Comey, and the implication is setting off a frenzy today in Washington. Joining us now with more is Fox News Chief White House correspondent John Roberts.
Good afternoon. You know, I've covered White Houses for a long time, going all the way back to President Clinton in 1999, and I have never seen the sort of thing come from a president that came from President Trump today when he tweeted what many people are taking as a not-so-veiled threat against James Comey, saying, quote, James Comey better hope that there are no tapes of our conversations before he starts leaking to the press. The genesis of this appeared to be an article in the New York Times today suggesting that James Comey had been asked by the president during one of their conversations, might have been dinner here at the White House earlier in the year, to pledge loyalty to the president. Now, the president denied to our Judge Jeanine Pirro today that he ever asked that question, but it seems that the president maybe got an idea that James Comey was leaking the contents of some of their conversations, and then that would go to the idea that the president had said that the FBI director told him on 3 occasions that he was not under investigation in connection with the Russia investigation at the FBI. Of course, this was all a very big topic of conversation and questioning at the daily briefing today. Let's watch this exchange between my colleague from Reuters and Sean Spicer.
I assume you're referring to the tweet, and I've talked to the president. The president has nothing further to add on that.
And why did he say that? Why did he tweet that? What should we interpret from that?
As I mentioned, the president has nothing further to add on that.
Are there recording devices in the Oval Office or in the residence?
As I said for the 3rd time, there is nothing further to add on that.
Does he think it's appropriate to threaten someone like Mr. Comey not to speak?
I don't think that's not a threat. He's simply stated a fact. The tweet speaks for itself. I'm moving on.
Sean Spicer answering questions from Jeff Mason, who also happens to be the president of the White House Correspondents Association. And Sean Spicer there saying he doesn't believe what the president tweeted out this morning amounts to a threat. But it certainly has gotten the attention of a lot of people up on Congress, among them Mark Warner, the senator from Virginia, who's also the ranking member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, who said if there is a White House taping system and if there are tapes of conversations between the president and the now fired FBI director, those should be handed over to the appropriate committee. And I should point out as well that we just learned this afternoon that the former FBI director has declined an invitation to appear in a closed session of the Senate Intelligence Committee on Tuesday. No reason given as to why he's not going to appear. Back to you.
Thank you so much, John. President Trump has sat down for an interview with Judge Jeanine, set to air tomorrow night. Judge Pirro did ask the president about the reports that he requested James Comey's loyalty shortly after inauguration.
Loyalty to the country, loyalty to the United States is important. You know, I mean, it depends on how you define loyalty. Number one. Number two, I don't know how that got there because I didn't ask that question.
What about the idea that in a tweet you said that there might be tape recordings?
Well, that I can't talk about. I won't talk about that. All I want is for Comey to be honest, and I hope he will be, and I'm sure he will be, I hope.
Eric, so much here, so much. Was it a threat? Was it a statement of fact? I mean, what's your take?
So immediately when he tweeted that this morning, I put it up, I retweeted it and said, hey, look at this. This is very interesting. I think what Trump is basically saying is he's very confident in what he said and what his people have said about what went on with James Comey, that James Comey said, in fact, to him, no, we're not investigating you, so let's move on. Yet the media wants to continue to harp on this, continue to play this up. Again, show me one shred of evidence that ties Donald Trump to any collusion. You can't do it. And if the president has lost trust and faith in his FBI director, that FBI director serves at the pleasure of the president, it's time for him to go, and it is time for him to go. I think he did everything constitutionally and ethically right.
Okay.
Just to tweet that and then to say I don't want to talk about it, always a good rule that if you don't want to talk about it, don't broadcast it out to millions upon millions of people.
Don't talk about it if you don't want to talk about it.
Don't tweet it if you don't want to talk about it, especially if you have millions and millions of followers. That's just kind of how I feel. Why would you tweet it if you didn't want to talk about it?
So much more.
Maybe he wanted someone to subpoena some tapes if there are any, and that would exonerate
I feel like that could be
everything
said in a
that he
text
said.
message, though.
Well, I think we're going to have a lot more to come on this for sure. And speaking of it, let's meet today's specialist. He is the former political editor at the Washington Examiner. He's also the co-host of the Fox News podcast, Perino and Stirewalt, I'll Tell You What. And he's the politics editor at Fox News Channel. But he specializes in making the best chicken wings this side of Triadelphia, West Virginia.
True.
Chris Stirewalt is here. And she's the host of the Laura Ingraham radio show, the editor and co-founder of LifeZet.com, a cultural and political website. And her upcoming book is titled Billionaire at the Barricades, the Populist versus the Establishment from Reagan to Trump. But she specializes in everything cultural and political. Laura Ingraham is here. All right, so I'm going to go back to this, Laura, this issue of whether or not it was a threat, whether or not it was simply a statement of fact. And I'm going to leave that for other people to debate. I'm going to take it at face value as a statement of fact. But is it presidential? Is it appropriate for the president to even be talking about it at all?
Well, I think it's long since passed, the conversation of whether Donald Trump is going to conform to some old notion of this is what presidents do. He's going to do what he's going to do. That's what he's always done. He's 70 years old. That's not going to change. I do think it's interesting that he put the word tapes in quotes. Not a lot of people have talked about that today. Donald Trump has had a way throughout the campaign and even into this presidency of getting people to talk about what he wants them to talk about. And everybody's been obsessed with this idea of the tapes. They're asking, Neil Cavuto was asking Alan Dershowitz last hour about, well, is this even illegal? And Dershowitz is like, no, it's actually totally legal in D.C. It's only a one-party consent.
Yep.
So everyone's focused on that. Meanwhile, the concern about what's happened in Washington with the issues that people care about, of course, health care, tax reform, the deregulatory moves that Trump has made, all of those are very positive. But Trump has gotten everybody talking about this tapes thing. I would doubt there are tapes in the Oval Office or wherever he met with Comey or the dinner, wherever he had dinner with him. Who knows? But I don't think he put the word tapes in quotes by accident. I actually think he did that for a reason.
How about, was it iPhone recording or what?
He did the same.
I don't think so.
I had the same thought, and he did exactly the same thing when he was talking about Obama tapped him.
Yeah.
He put tapped in quotes, and that means it didn't happen. And I assume that it didn't happen in this case, or the president better hope that he didn't make a mistake this morning and announce that there was a recording system in the White House, or the subpoenas will be stacking up outside the White House door. So I'm sure. And by the way, they're also not talking about the Russia stuff, and they're not talking about what he said to Lester Holt yesterday. So this, I'm perfectly willing to believe, is a canard.
It's a clear controlling of the narrative, Eric. And call me crazy, but if I call a customer service hotline, they're recording. So actually, I didn't think it was that far out of bounds.
Exactly.
Seriously, that there would be, I would presume, Lord, that they're recording in the White House.
I also find it very interesting that James Comey, who was called to testify on Tuesday, just said, nope, not going to do it. I think this is very, very interesting. I think this is Donald Trump saying, hey, stay on this. There's more to it. And I will exonerate all the things he's saying about what went back and forth between Comey and Donald Trump.
Think of the Comey thing for just a minute. Comey has rushed to the cameras back in July. He sent the big memo in October, then a follow-up memo. Oh, it wasn't really anything about the Wiener thing. Then he testifies before Congress, and suddenly the cat's got his tongue. Doesn't anyone find that interesting? A closed-door session of Congress, former FBI director, all this news out there that apparently he can correct all this because Donald Trump's, according to his sources or his people he's told this to contemporaneously, that Trump is all wrong about this. So suddenly he's reticent to speak. That's very interesting.
Are you surprised that Comey's declining to testify? Because I was surprised that he's declining to testify.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised by it, honestly. Why wouldn't he? But then again, it just makes everything so much more confusing. I want to know what he knows so badly. I really want to hear from him. I want to hear from Susan Rice. There's so many people that I want to hear from that apparently we're just never going to get to hear from.
Yeah.
But the investigation's going to continue with him or without him.
Yeah.
And maybe we will hear from him if Trump keeps I think it was a threat. It was a veiled threat. I don't know if it was a serious threat, but the way the sentence was structured was obviously a threat.
This is New York bravado. This is the bravado of Donald Trump. We saw this during the campaign. I'm stunned that everybody's surprised.
But it's bizarre.
Even in a New York bravado type of way, you don't go there unless you're pretty darn sure you're going to win if anyone does call it.
I think he's confident there's no collusion with Russia. I think he's confident he's not under investigation. I think pretty much everybody I've talked to, my sources in law enforcement, he's not under investigation, personal investigation. I'm sure the associates of Trump are under investigation. I think he's extremely confident.
Speaking of Russia, how many retweets and likes his tweets get?
I'm sure that he probably is interested in it.
I think he does.
In an interview airing this weekend with Justice with Judge Jeanine Pirro, So President Trump responds to calls for a special prosecutor to oversee the Russia investigation.
I don't want to be in a position where it's not done correctly. So let them do it correctly. Let them take their time.
You're talking about the House, the Senate, and the FBI.
I'm talking about the House, the Senate, the FBI.
So no independent commission.
I don't think you need it. I mean, honestly, whatever's going to do the best, but I don't think you need it.
But they're playing politics. Can't you see that?
Stirewalt, I want to get your take on this. We're going to go to that clip in a second, but in general. So Eric Bolling says many times, and he's right, we don't have any evidence of collusion at this point. So let's take that at face value. Let's take collusion off the table. But what we do know, what everybody seems to agree on, is there was at least an attempt by Russia to influence our election.
Right.
Would you like to see, or do you expect to see more concern from President Trump on that issue alone?
Well, I think perhaps the events of this week have sealed in his mind, based on what he said to Judge Janine, that no one in Washington needs a successful resolution to one of these investigations more than Donald J. Trump. No one more than him needs one of these three to come to a fruitful conclusion. If somebody who worked for him did something wrong, he needs to know that. He needs to move on. But there will never be closure. There will never be any advancement to the things that Laura was talking about, the priorities that he cares about, as long as Democrats have this football, and he's got to take it out of their hands. And an investigation has to be completed for that to happen.
Is this the new email scandal for Donald Trump? The same way it hung over Hillary's head and she was never able to get out a political message?
One thing we all have to realize, there is no federal statute governing the independent counsel now. It lapsed. So there is no federal, there's really no federal set of rules to even help us figure out how to appoint a special prosecutor. But I will go back to my point, which I think gets lost in a lot of this. A lot of these folks obsessed about this on every cable channel are really out of touch with how most Americans are living their lives. I'm not saying it's not important. I think this should be investigated. Donald Trump said this multiple times, and it will be investigated. But most people are trying to figure out, oh my gosh, I got rising healthcare premiums. I don't know if I can send my kids to college. I mean, I'm worried about my wages. And I know a lot of the never-Trumpers, and Catherine, you're one of them, a lot of the never-Trumpers like, see, we're going to have our see I told you so moment. We're going to get him. We're going to show that he was working with Putin to get the Michigan vote turned out. I think that is so embarrassing for people to hang their hat on this. And if Democrats want to go to the voters in 2018 and try to make the case that they're fit to govern because Donald Trump colluded with the Russians, I think they're going to be sorry.
I just want to point out, I'm not a never-Trumper.
At one point,
never ever said that ever. I'm a libertarian. I'm completely politically independent. There's things that he said that I like, things that he said that I don't like.
I mean, it's okay. A lot of people don't like Trump.
Hey, I take things on an issue-by-issue basis, which is great about being a small L libertarian, not having a. No. I think with the Russia thing, I think we all should want to know. I think we should wait and see until the people who know things about conducting these investigations and how long they take.
Who are those
people, the Justice Department. Okay, it's only been 10 months. It's only been 10 months. I think we wait and we see. We wait and we see.
We wait and we see. Catherine, that's exactly what the Democrats want. They want to wait and see all the way to 2020.
That's what Americans
want. No, they don't.
No, they don't.
Politically, maybe you're right. I want to get you in 1 second.
This is what we talked about yesterday. I think we said, how long? What's your deadline? Are you going to continue to investigate?
There is no deadline with the federal government.
Politically in 2020.
But no, I think
you got not one shred. Chris, let me use a line from Barack Obama. Not one smidgen of evidence has tied Donald Trump to any sort of collusion with the Russians.
Politically speaking,
one of these investigations has to come to its point of conclusion. One of them has to finish.
Absolutely.
The FBI is the most likely suspect because the House and the Senate, as Laura points out, have partisan influence. There are partisan interests that are at work that will slow down their work. I think that we've seen good efforts on the part of the Senate for them to try to do a better job and rise above a bit, but it's going to be up to the FBI to finish this work, and that's what Donald Trump said. That's what the president just said.
As far as I can tell, the only people who won't testify are Susan Rice and now Jim Comey.
Yeah.
You got Carter Page is doing interviews on pretty much every cable. I mean, Paul Manafort, I mean, he was giving quotes to the New York Times just a couple months ago. Pretty much all these people, I think, are willing to tell their story.
We also know General Mike Flynn has been subpoenaed, at least for documents around his, what he knows. I think politically, though, you make a really good point, Laura, which is that if this continues to be the prevailing conversation, right? Mm-hmm. Ultimately, that probably will not bode well for the Dems, and I've been saying that. In order for them, yes, or the country, but just strictly from the political sphere, they have to come up with a compelling message that connects economically with people. And so just the he's really, really bad, and we should be really, really scared of him, it didn't work in November.
That's how they lost.
Look at what happened with impeachment and the Republicans in 1998. I was around then, and I was covering all of this. Republicans thought, we're going to get, it's like Lucy in the football. We're going to get Clinton now. And guess what? It didn't help Republicans at all. Mm-hmm. at all.
No, you got to come up with a real message. It has to have some economic tie-in. Well, President Trump is looking to pull the plug on press briefings after this week's brutal treatment from our mainstream media. But should he follow through on that threat? Please make sure to follow us on social media at Specialist FNC on both Twitter and Facebook. Stay with us.
President Trump is frustrated with the fake news media. This morning, he mused on Twitter about possibly canceling the daily press briefing. On cue, the mainstream media went apoplectic. After all, the liberal journalists, they're loving all the FaceTime they're getting on TV, asking Spicer gotcha questions. In an interview airing this weekend on Justice with Jeanine Pirro, President Trump expands on his thinking. Listen.
Are you moving so quickly that your communications department cannot keep up with you?
Yes, that's true.
So what do we do about that?
We don't have press conferences, and we do...
You don't mean that.
Well, just don't have them. Unless I have them every 2 weeks and I do myself. We don't have them. I think it's a good idea. Yeah. First of all, you have a level of hostility that's incredible, and it's very unfair.
All right, Laura, you and I know Mr. Trump, President Trump, Donald Trump for 15 years.
Yep.
You don't think he's really going to cancel the press briefing, do you?
I think it's part of this cat and mouse game that, again, if you've known him for as long as we have, you're used to this. This is what he does with people. It's a bit of a challenge. The media gets back on their heels, and then most regular Americans are watching this going, that sounds like a great idea. Would love to see the president out there every other week, because, you know, they wouldn't be able to probably, you know, push back as much as they maybe do against Huckabee or Sean Spicer, who I think have both done a very good job, especially under the circumstances. But the press should be celebrating about this. If I'm in the press, you're going to get the president himself every other week. Remember back during Obama, we would go several months without a press conference with the president. I think there was one point, like 11 months or 10 months, if my memory serves me correct.
Correct.
I mean, getting Donald Trump out there every 2 weeks, that'd be a dream. So the press should be pushing back.
I'll throw it to Chris. You know why they don't? They're becoming rock stars themselves. The press briefing room, it's Jonathan Karl.
Thrush is like a cult hero.
Yeah, Thrush lost his hat.
Yeah, exactly.
You believe Glenn Thrush took his hat off at briefings?
No comment. I will say, though, that I think that the press should not take the bait on this. I think it's hard for them to do it. One of the most exhausting narratives, one of the most exhausting storylines of the Trump era has been the endless, boundless self-regard of the Washington press corps. Democracy dies in darkness, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, like, give me a break. You know what they should say to the president? Cancel him. Fine. You cancel them, and we will crack your walnuts worse than we were cracking them before.
Is that possible?
Of course.
Is that possible?
Of course.
Eboni, is it possible? It is so, the mainstream media is so against Donald Trump. I can't believe they can crack his walnuts any worse than they already are cracking his walnuts.
I think that they can. I will tell you this, Eric. Do they not like him? Absolutely. Does that show in their coverage? Absolutely. But I got to tell you, Eric, I can't cry any tears for President Trump over this issue of delegitimizing his presidency. Not when he was the chief enforcer of birtherism. Come on. Like, this is the type of thing that I think, to Laura's point, the bravado, it kind of invites it. I think he kind of wins with it. I think it creates a narrative of us versus them that always tends to play to his base.
There's no way that he's being serious.
He announced a trip, a major foreign policy trip today. He's going to Israel. He's going to the Vatican. He's going to Mecca, the home sites of the three major religions in on the planet. And no one picked that up. All they want to know is, what did Donald Trump tweet about tapes?
Well, he maybe could have avoided that by not having tweeted about tapes. That's what I'm saying. He's more responsible for this narrative in some ways than the media. If he wanted them to talk about that, maybe he would have tweeted about that. Everybody's looking at Donald Trump's Twitter.
Yes,
in terms of not having press conferences, it's never going to happen. It's like when you're a kid and you behave bad, and your mom's like, well, you're not going to get any Christmas stuff, and she doesn't really mean it.
Well, unless the kid is being bad, and the kid goes, maybe I am being bad.
Yeah.
And Laura,
well, it's a manipulation tactic more than a serious threat.
When he tweets in Facebook's his comments, 100 million people see
I think what he said was brilliant. If I were he, I would probably start cutting back the briefings. I would even make them a little shorter. We have some briefings where Spicer will go back to the same person twice. Like, why do we need briefings that are an hour long? Do a 20-minute. You can do a gaggle in the morning as needed. I think a lot of Americans are kind of just like, let's get on with this governing.
I think they're too long. I agree with that, Laura.
They're too long. And guys, the press is less popular than the president. I will tell you that. They're less popular
than Congress. I'll tell you this too, Eric.
Well, let's not get carried away.
I will say that, you know, sometimes delegating, which is essentially what you have to do, it does kind of, it's not the best, you know, like, so if it were me, I like the idea of a press corps and a briefing situation, but I wouldn't be mad if I'm President Trump. No one can articulate it better than he can. Nobody can advocate for his positions.
He changes his mind a lot also.
There's truth in all that you say. There's truth in all that you say. However, at a certain point, this president will have to start delegating responsibility to trusted individuals inside of his administration and saying, I've got your back. You have my back. I've got your back. This two-way street loyalty is something that he has not figured out yet about being president. And you can't have Sean Spicer out there every day twisting in the wind. Maybe this is your last day. Maybe I'm going to fire.
That's not right. Yeah, I didn't like that. I mean, these people they get in that White House at 7 a.m. and they don't leave till 11 p.m. And don't hang them out to dry like. I didn't like that.
Well, okay, fair enough. But look, Laura, I've been fairly critical of the communications staff, the department. The message that Donald Trump is trying to deliver sometimes gets a little murky.
He steps on his own message sometimes, and I think Catherine's right about that. He steps on his own message.
So let me ask you this, Laura. This is I'm being very serious. Before Sean Spicer was named as press secretary, your name was floated because you've known the guy a long time. You understand his policies. I've known him a long time. Did he make a mistake by picking someone who came from the establishment wing of the party?
I don't think so. I think his instincts, his political instincts, contrary to what a lot of people are saying today because of tape saying, I wouldn't have tweeted that out either, but his instincts have been really strong. I only have seen a couple of other people with the instincts that he's had politically and for the time. One was Reagan, for whom I worked, and the other was Barack Obama. Just political instincts. He's had good instincts. I think he's gotten in trouble, frankly, when he hasn't followed his instincts. And I think on this issue with the press, I think he's doing the right thing. He needs to go to the Middle East next week, and he'll be the first president ever to hit the locales of the 3 major religions in the world. No one's ever done that before. I think you're going to see this narrative change. And if the press wants to stay on the Russian ambassador or collusion, I think they're going to look really silly next week. Next week's going to be a big time.
I predict the press looks really silly next week. All right, let's leave it right there. With James Comey out now, has the door blown wide open for reinvestigating Hillary Clinton and her email scandal? When we come back.
Now that FBI Director James Comey has been canned, will Hillary Clinton get reinvestigated or indicted? The memo from Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein that helped lead to Comey's firing made a compelling point. Quote, the FBI director was wrong to usurp the Attorney General's authority on July 5th, 2016, and announced his conclusion that the Clinton email case be closed without prosecution. It is not the function of the director to make such an announcement. Meanwhile, acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe shared his concerns with the Senate Intelligence Committee yesterday.
I think morale has always been good. However, we had there were folks within our agency who were frustrated with the outcome of the Hillary Clinton case, and some of those folks were very vocal about those concerns.
All right. I'm certainly among those who are frustrated by the outcome of the Hillary Clinton case. But Eboni, what do you think about the fact that, we're talking about it now?
Yeah, for me, I think she probably should have been indicted. I think if it had been anyone else but Hillary Rodham Clinton, she would have been indicted. But quite frankly, I'm tired of spending money on the Clintons. I'm serious.
Big time out, you two. I'm calling both of you out.
What's up?
The last 2 days, you were saying we should continue this Trump investigation, even though for 10 months.
Right. But you're saying we should end the Trump investigation, but continue the Hillary investigation.
Here's what I'm saying.
Trying to be fair and balanced.
I'm saying you guys both said we should continue Trump's investigation going forward ad nauseum. I think I even said. But now you're saying you're tired of the Hillary Clinton investigation.
Let me get okay. Here's the distinguishing factor. Okay. President Trump is our current commander in chief. He's relevant. Hillary Clinton, I argue she's irrelevant. And I think by continuing continuing to investigate her is putting them back in the spotlight, making her still relevant. Just make her go away, Eric. Please.
Well, listen, I'm all for putting the Hillary Clinton email scandal to rest and that you found nothing, or James Comey says you're not going to find anything. And you know what? They also found nothing with Trump, too. Let's put that one to rest and move on to make the country great again.
I think that what we really need is an American public that believes the rule of law matters again in the United States. And I think everything has become so polarized. Democrats are going to think that investigation into Hillary, if that happens, which I don't think it will, is going to be Trump getting revenge again, making good on his promise during that October debate. Stirewalt. It was like, I'm going to put you in jail. That was one of the great moments. I'm going to put you in jail. So he's going to make good on that promise. So the Democrats would say it's illegitimate. No matter what they found, no matter what was uncovered, it would be determined to be illegitimate.
Especially with all of this going on.
I just don't think that's...
I will say
I'm not saying there's not grounds, by the way. I'm saying it probably isn't where we're going to go.
When you talk to people in the intelligence and law enforcement communities, as you all have, it was heartbreaking for them, regardless of their partisan leanings, that no one paid a price in this case. I agree with you. I think it's unlikely that this will be reopened or that there'll be reconsideration. But if they were to say Huma Abedin or somebody in this universe who so grossly or blatantly mishandled these things, it would be a huge shot in the arm because these people want consequences for the mishandling of state secrets.
It bothers me that there were no consequences for any of these people, but it's just in terms of optics, handling it now, I feel like that's a problem for Trump. They really do.
Always slide
They really do. They're like that kid in school who can do whatever they want because their mom is a lunch lady.
Can we disbar her like we disbarred?
Maybe they're the Illuminati, Laura.
There is one more thing. We do have evidence, factual evidence, that Hillary Clinton mishandled her email server. There is absolutely no evidence that Donald Trump did anything, any collusion with the Russians.
Not yet. All right. We got another move by the Trump administration that will for sure infuriate liberals. Jeff Sessions ordering a major escalation in the targeting of drug criminals. Don't go away.
Welcome back to the Fox News Specialists. Our specialists today are Laura Ingraham and Chris Stirewalt. So let's continue our conversation. Attorney General Jeff Sessions announcing a massive overhaul in sentencing criminals, reversing Obama-era policies that some critics said were too lenient, especially on drug crimes.
We know that drugs and crime go hand in hand. They just do. The facts prove that's so. Drug trafficking is an inherently dangerous and violent business. If you want to collect a drug debt, you can't file a lawsuit in court. You collect it with the barrel of a gun. If you are a drug trafficker, we will not look the other way. We will not be willfully blind to your misconduct. You drug dealers are going to prison.
All right, the new policy orders federal prosecutors to seek the most severe charges possible against criminal suspects. Okay, Stirewalt, I'm going to start with you on this. Now, I'm going to kind of put on my former criminal defense lawyer hat around this. Okay. I think the problem here is that with the Eric Holder and Obama era things, they really were making, I think they put a Band-Aid on this issue. What they were really trying to address were the mandatory minimums to sentencing reform, which is, by the way, a bipartisan effort. And instead of doing that, going to the heart of reforming that issue, they say, well, let's just turn the other way around some of the most severe crimes to avoid the most severe penalties. And now we have what we have now coming out of session.
And this relates to things like charging crack cocaine, cocaine base differently than actual cocaine, We should remember in this discussion the purpose of the institution of these laws under the Clinton administration. The purpose of the institution of these laws was not about drugs. It was about street crime and murder. It was about places like Baltimore, Detroit, Washington, D.C., when Washington, D.C. had almost 1,000 murders in the late 1980s and the early 1990s each year. These laws were designed to take people off the streets who were gangbangers who were involved in this stuff. So these are not laws about, these were not primarily laws about drug interdiction primarily. They were about cleaning up bad neighborhoods, Cabrini Green, cleaning up the streets, and people like Jeff Sessions would argue that increases in violent crime in communities might have something to do with the rollback of these sentencing.
The war on drugs has been so successful. That's why overdose deaths are going up constantly. This is so ridiculous. He withdrew part of Eric Holder's Smart on Crime initiative, which encouraged people to focus on serious crimes and reduce the amount of people that are going to prison for nonviolent crimes. Why was that a bad thing? Who is thinking that it's a bad thing that we don't have tons and tons of people incarcerated for ridiculous amounts of time because of a nonviolent crime.
Well,
and if people, it's more expensive, and it doesn't do anybody any good. I don't see the justification for it other than some sort of ideological thing of bad people do drugs, which, by the way, Jeff Sessions has said. He said good people don't smoke marijuana. Oftentimes, annoying people smoke marijuana, but saying that good people don't smoke marijuana, that says everything that needs to be said about his position on this issue.
Brought to you by, no, I'm just
No, I'm serious.
Look, I think what Jeff Sessions is doing is what Donald Trump campaigned on, a return to law and order in the United States. The drug crimes in the country disproportionately affect the poor and the minorities, and it's devastating.
Okay, being in prison disproportionately affect the poor and minorities, particularly in terms of drug offenses.
Right, Catherine, what I'm trying to get to is that the drug pushers in this country, especially those connected with the criminal gang element, Florenzia 13, the Latin Kings, MS-13, which are marauding the streets of Chicago, Detroit, here in New York City, even with crime down. This has been devastating. It's been devastating to the poorest communities. If Democrats or libertarians want to go across the country making this big case that we need to be more compassionate to the drug pushers, then I think we should have that debate morning.
Nonviolent criminals.
Eric. Well, I don't think that's what he was focusing on today. He wasn't focusing on the nonviolent criminals.
Right. Well, listen, I understand. I agree with Laura that this is something that Donald Trump and his base are very, very strong and adamant about. Personally, I've been on record saying, look, I think we overfought the war on drugs when it's in my opinion, I don't think it's a winnable war. I think the smarter avenue is to get tougher on immigration, get tougher on MS-13 coming across the border, get tougher on drug people, mules bringing drugs across the border.
And the war on drugs, and they won't want to come over anyway.
I mean, listen, look, if you're tied to a drug crime and a violent crime, then you go away.
More kids are smoking pot in Colorado today. By the way, do we all think that's a good thing?
My son is in Colorado right now, Laura.
Do we all think that's a good thing? Yay, more kids are smoking pot.
So should we throw them all in prison?
But we should.
No, I don't think we should give it the imprimatur of legitimacy. Once you do that, kids think it's not a big deal. Mom and dad smoking on the weekend, no big deal. Why can't I? If that's what we think is going to get our country going down the right road, then we should all just say it. Forget about the schizophrenia it increases the chances of getting. Forget about all the psychosis.
What's America's #1 drug problem today?
Opioids.
Prescription drugs. They're not coming over the border. They're coming from inside the United States.
Well, no,
they are. They're coming over the border, Chris.
A lot of the heroin is coming from Mexico now, not from
Korea. Korea is a major supplier of opioids.
I'm talking about opioid prescription drugs that are ravaging this country. That this addiction. This is the problem.
You can't say they're not coming across the border.
They're making them. They're synthetic manufacture.
I understand. What I'm saying is, we have a problem in broken communities, broken cultures, broken spaces where people are not binding together to take care of each other. There is no governmental solution that is going to deal with this in the same way that strong communities, strong families, and strong neighborhoods will.
Well, you can also put those guys in jail, the drug pushers. Put them in jail.
But Laura, I don't think anybody.
What defines a drug pusher?
Someone who sells illegal narcotics.
In this moment, though, Laura, I don't think most people think that drug offenders need to just be celebrated, right? But what I'm talking about is when we talk about specifically what Jeff Sessions is talking about today, this is a mandatory minimum issue. Now, as an attorney, my issue is this. I have a problem with mandatory minimums, though, because it takes discretion out of our trusted judges and prosecutors. Why do we have a system if we don't trust them?
You may be right about mandatory minimums. Listen, I think we need reform in that area, absolutely. But you can draw a distinction between a dealer, a distributor, and a user.
And the judge can do that. And the judge can do that themselves. Why a mandatory minimum? Maybe someone has no priors, they have a great life, but they just had like a certain number of pills. They had this number, and they had like were one over this for a certain sentence.
That is not what Sessions was addressing today.
I don't think that he was addressing a change in culture, focusing on incarceration of people for doing drugs, which is very negative and ineffective.
I think the culture that was encouraged under the Obama administration was one of more placidity toward the drug culture. There's no doubt about it, and it's a new game now. And I guess we're going to see how that works with Trump. Maybe it'll be an ultimate failure. It could be a complete failure, in which case you'll be proven right. But I think most people think it's a little out of hand.
Most Americans support legal marijuana.
What we know is that we need a lot of criminal justice reform in this country. Now, not even liberals are safe from their fellow liberals anymore, while comedian Amy Schumer is facing huge backlash from the left over her new comedy. Right after this.
Politically correct insanity now has liberals attacking liberals. Comedian Amy Schumer is facing serious backlash for her new movie, Snatched. Schumer and co-star Goldie Hawn go on an exotic vacation to South America, get held captive, and need to escape the bad guys. The New York Times is going after the film, stating that it's racist because there are, quote, dark-skinned thugs with funny accents who are, spoiler alert, eventually killed by Schumer and Hawn to bring comedy to the audience.
I will get us out of here.
I need you to believe in me.
Mom, come on!
Do you think maybe that guy's okay? I saw his brains.
Why can't you just make me feel better?
Oh, I think the New York Times is right on point. You know, people are clearly going to get all of their social and political views from this movie. Definitely going to take it seriously. No, I'm kidding.
It's insane. On the right, we say this all the time. Hey, come on, give us a break. There's no racism. There's no xenophobia involved whatsoever here.
Couldn't it have happened to a better person than Amy Schumer? I actually read today that her brother screened it with her and her mom, I guess, this film, which I haven't seen. And I guess there's a nip slip or something. She shows her breasts. And her brother said, I think he couldn't eat for a week or something. He's totally
What's your
disgusted.
Mom? Show that to your mom.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more offensive that it's aggressively unfunny. And Goldie Hawn, whom I adore, somehow got linked up with Schumer.
Speaking of Goldie Hawn, Laura, I would like to say optically, I think she looks incredible. And she's a woman of a particular age, and she looks
like her.
amazing.
I always have. Since the Laughing days.
That's what I'm focused on, what's important in life. And that's how good Goldie Hawn looks.
Has anybody ever seen The Party with Peter Sellers?
No.
Okay,
hilarious.
One of the funniest movies ever made in history, in which Peter Sellers wears dark skin, what do we call blackface, to play an Indian guy.
Couldn't do that today.
Oh, you couldn't do that.
Let's hope not.
And the whole funniest scene in the movie is when his dialect is ununderstandable, and it's this huge riotous laughter. If you think about how far in 50 years you go from a point where that is a box office movie to this, which is probably thought of PC as it's being made, to now it's like, in the end, we found that you were insensitive. In the end, your sensitivity score is only a 4.
This is why the only comedy that now we seem to have is political comedy, which by its very definition is it doesn't bring the country together. Humor, most people can laugh at all humor. Humor that's really good, doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican, situational, observational,
generational.
Let me follow that. Did you see what Colbert did last night? Did you see his little monologue at the end? He said, we got Trump to weigh in on me and the show, and he did this little thing. Yay. I mean, how cheap and sleazy and gross is that?
It's unfunny, but I mean, I'm still watching old YouTube Johnny Carson, because he was so funny, and he wasn't mean-spirited. He wasn't really political. Neither was Leno.
Amy Schumer, she was supposed to have some sort of gun scene in this movie, and she cut that because she also has fancied herself some sort of gun control hero now. So she got rid of that, and now she's still being called a racist.
But to Laura's point, there is some really good political comedy. I mean, look at Richard Pryor, look at, back in the days, Red Fox. I mean, they would infuse politics in their future and race and culture in a way that everybody... No, it wasn't divisive. It wasn't divisive at all.
Dave Chappelle is a great example where, he puts a lot of... Obviously, lately on Saturday Night Live, he's bringing in, and it's funny. It's bipartisan,
But why doesn't Saturday Night Live? There's a wealth of comedy. If you want to do real political comedy, where were they during the Obama years?
Right.
Where were they with the Loretta Lynch, Bill Clinton meeting in the plane? I mean, there was a lot of humor that happened.
By the way, this
how about
weekend,
Lois Lerner refusing to testify?
You saw was running around the streets of Manhattan this weekend.
Yeah, again, focused on Trump
Melissa
because
McCarthy
they're all
being
Democrats.
Sean Spicer with his podium up and down 6th Avenue.
All right.
It's good stuff, though.
Definitely. All right. Don't go away. We circle back with our specialist Laura Ingraham and Chris Stirewalt right after this.
T-shirting your favorite rock band, checking your makeup and my Ray-Bans, breaking hearts like only you can in your snapback.
All right, time to circle back. I'll kick it off. Laura, you, if I'm not mistaken, used to work at the Supreme Court, yes, no?
I was a law clerk for Justice Thomas.
Now there's rumors that I think Grassley said there's going to be a vacancy coming up soon. Thoughts?
If I had to bet, I would bet that there would be a vacancy this summer. It'd be usually at the end of the term, which ends at June 21st, something like that. And most likely, if I had to guess, it would be Justice Anthony M. Kennedy.
Yeah, that's
and his law clerk, former law clerk, Neil Gorsuch, is now a justice. It's weird to think of former clerks and justices on the court together. He's been there a long, long time. And I don't know. I have a sense he's ready to move on, but who knows? Everyone speculates, and oftentimes they're wrong.
All right, Eb.
All right, I got a question for Stirewalt. We were talking about this in the green room. These cufflinks, I wish I could give you some cufflink cam. These are jade, you guys. They're a family heirloom, and apparently there's a lot more where that came from. Tell us about your favorite, most ornate pair.
Well, these were Newman Claude Stirewalts, born in Timothy, Illinois.
I love you.
A long time ago, and back in the 30s, ornate, gaudy jewelry was in, and I'm not much of an ornate or gaudy guy.
Yeah, right.
But after my after my father died, we were going through all of his stuff, and there was this cache, these tremendous cufflinks, these big honking things that no one would have worn in the pared down 80s and 90s. But I really like these suckers. And NC Stirewalt deserves a little something extra.
You're slaying them.
Let's get Katherine.
What should I have for dinner tonight, Chris?
Oh. What should you have for dinner? Chicken wings.
Chicken wings? What do you think?
You're skinny. Get some carbs in you, girl.
Wait, why do you say you're the best chicken wings aside of where?
Triadelphia, West Virginia, because it's the truth. Because I didn't come here to lie. I came here to tell you the truth, and they are the best chicken wings.
So West Virginia is just a little bit south of here, I think, on the
homemade pasta.
South?
Always good on a Friday night. Cold in New York. Cold and rainy. Homemade pasta.
There you go. Leave it right there. Thank you to our Fox News specialists today, Laura Ingraham and Chris Stirewalt. And we thank all of you for watching. It's been a great week. Make sure to follow us on social media at Specialist FNC in both Twitter and Facebook. Remember, 5 o'clock will never be the same. Special report coming up now.